right, woodchuck chuckers, we're back. We've got the Cabrio Dryer with the same problem it always has. This time it burned out yet again for a third time. And let me show you what we got going on. I've already taken it out of the dryer. If you want to see that process, I'm going to send a link to the other video, the first one I did. And pulled it out of here, and as you can tell, it has burnt up yet again. Pull that out of there. This is gonna have to glue that before I put it back together. But what has happened is the same thing as always. This pin burned up on the relay. So the last time, this track here burnt up and I replaced it. Rather, actually this track here burned up and I replaced it. The time before that I replaced this track. And what happened this time was the terminal on the relay actually melted itself completely. And now I think it's actually probably a little too low to get some solder on there and repair it for free like I've been doing. This time we're actually going to have to invest in some money. And what I did was splurge and go to Amazon. And I'll put a link to this. There was a Amazon purchase of a brand new relay. Came with a solder sucker, which I won't use because I have a nicer one, a professional one. So we're going to have to unsolder this relay and solder in a new one. And we'll go through the process here. Should be pretty quick and simple, and then we can get this thing working yet again. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is clean up this board. There's a fair amount of char on it from the burnt pin where it burned out. And the best way, you can probably clean that up too. The best way to do that is with some isopropyl alcohol and an old toothbrush. Been using this for probably 16 years. Seems to work pretty well. I used to have a squirt bottle where I worked, but I'm just going to pour some into a potato chip top. Now we have some alcohol we can clean with. And always remember, sometimes alcohol is the solution. And that does make very short work of the singe on the board. And since it's isopropyl, it will evaporate pretty quickly and leave us with a nice extra clean PCB ready for us to repair. Big difference in a real short time. And while we've got that out here, looks like we had some come through the bottom. That's okay, it'll evaporate. Well, we got that out here. Before this evaporates, I'm going to clean up this as well. Not so critical to have that clean, but it'll just look better. This is the third time that this board has fried. It's always been the relay. There's so much current going through those pins that it usually just burns the pin out. The first things to fail are the tracks on the board, which I've replaced twice. The tracks here get burnt. These little tracks that you see that take the electricity, they will burn right out here and here. And I've replaced them with hard wire. I'll give you a link to my other video where I repaired this with just some regular 12-2 wire. This time the pin burnt again, and I think it burnt down too far to make it actually repairable. So we are going to put in a replacement relay this time. I've got my soldering iron heated up over here. Nice and hot. You can get soldering irons pretty cheap. If you know where to look. I got this one off of eBay years ago, and it has served me very well. This is the Sodapult solder sucker. I've used this for decades. When I used to be a professional solderer, This is what I used the most. It works very well. This is what actually came with the relay. The whole thing was under 10 bucks. So really a pretty cheap solder sucker, price-wise. I'm not going to try it to see how well it works, just because I know this guy is going to work flawlessly for me. Now, to remove components like this, it's very important that the first thing you do is add solder. I mean, that sounds counterintuitive because you want to take the solder out, but in order to get the solder out, you are going to have to add some first. And the reason for that is you're putting in fresh flux into the solder joint to make it flow better. The more flow you get, the better the solder is going to move, and the easier it will be to suck that out of the port that you're trying to get. One issue you're going to run into with relays like this is they deal with a lot of current, so the tracks are going to be pretty deep, pretty hefty, and you're going to have trouble heating up the solder enough around the track to get that to flow. And it is kind of a timing issue, which you may have to play with a couple of times to get the solder hot around it. There we go. And heat it up, and then move one off and the other on to get that to flow. One thing I've discovered with years of practice is once you get that majority of the solder removed, wiggle that pin with a fingernail or a pair of pliers, and you'll feel that snap away from the rest of the frame, the last little bit of solder that's holding it in place. Now that guy is loose and he'll be able to drop right out of there. So that one I had to put some solder on, suck it out, and then put more solder on, and then suck that out to get it free. This one I will probably have to do the same thing. Oh, it's moved, it's free. Another thing that I've developed over time from soldering, and you might notice me doing it, is I'm actually breathing out as I'm soldering because those fumes are really not good for you. Depending on what type of solder you're using, they can actually be pretty bad for you. And it's just a technique I've developed over the years to blow that gunk away from me as I'm soldering. So I'll move my connection over there. There we go. And I think that actually just fell out. Let's turn this over and see if that's the case. Yes, it is. So there we go. Our relay is out of there now. And you can see here that these pins have burnt, the whole trace is burnt all the way through. Trace in the top still okay, but the trace underneath is completely burnt out. But that's okay, that's what these are for, to replace those traces. So now we're going to get the new relay. Again, stick the new relay in. You can't get it wrong, it only goes in one way. We're going to slide that into the hole, maybe, if I can get it lined up just right. Looks like one of the pins is bent. Yep, ever so slightly bent in. Zoom out a little bit here. Just going to encourage that back into place, and then try that again. There we go. So now, if I can get this angle just right, you can now see these pins are sticking up where they need to be, and these two pins are up where they need to be as well. The previous relay, this pin here had burnt so many times that it was down below the surface and there was nothing to connect to. Now we've actually got something that we can connect to. So I can heat this up, move that back over, solder those in. So let's get some fresh solder on my tip here. Zoom out a little bit. Some fresh solder on my tip. And I'm just going to lightly tack it just so it doesn't fall. and then I can apply more solder there. I'm also blowing on that to cool it quicker, so it'll stay put. Now we've got that held in place. Clean my tip. New solder. New solder. New solder. This guy needs to move. This could be a little more challenging because this is actually 12-2, so this is a really hefty piece of wire here. Yep, I had a feeling that was going to do that. There we go. Okay, perfect. Now I can solder that down in place. There we go. Now that joint is not pretty. I didn't expect it to be because of what we're working with the burnout track, but it has a lot more connectivity than it did, which was none. So we are connected now. This is the plug going out to the dryer motor. We've got good connection there, good connection here. New connection there. I'll get a little more isopropyl and clean up. There we go. We are back in business. That is just a quick couple-minute repair. Now all that's left is take it over and see if our dryer works. Quick and simple. $10 in repair parts. And I've got a solder sucker that I'll probably never use, but it should work well for what you're doing if you're trying that. Again, the key is to get the solder heated up, add solder to it to get the old solder flowing. You'll probably have to do the process a couple of times, suck it out a couple, 3 times to get it to move. Once you get enough of the solder out, you can apply side pressure to those pins until they snap free from the sides or what's left holding them. And then once they are free, then you should be good to let it fall right out of there. Let's go give it a try. Okay, the board is all put back in. You can see that on the other video. It's all put back together. Got it plugged back in the wall. Lights up as before. And she now spins the way she's supposed to.